I'm going to present about the media story in Nicaragua. After I researched of the story, I think the media industry in Nicaragua, which is a developing country and has a weak economic power, is running behind the world. In Nicaragua, the media has been intricately bound up with the nation's political and ideological struggles. Despite the fact that the majority of the population cannot afford to buy a newspaper, the press plays a fundamental role in national affairs and in the formation and the expression of elite, as well as broader public opinion. Traditionally, politicians have owned the media and used it as an instrument to bestow favors upon their political allies or to attack adversaries. Moreover, despite the fact that the nation's civil war has ended and the country has embarked on the same neoliberal political and economic programs of the majority of its Latin American neighbors, the press remains polarized between supporters and the dictators of the parties who are in power. The Nicaraguan media encountered problems in 1994 because every news outlet was somehow linked to or openly affiliated with a political party. In this year, there were many incidents of physical abuse by police against reporters covering demonstrations or the public disturbances. For example, an internal conflict between radicals and reformers erupted at Barricada. Ortega, the head of the Sandinista party, fired 16 reporters and the editor-in-chief for their alleged support of the reformist politician. The infighting became a media war with Ortega's side in control of 3 radio stations and 1 television channel, and the reformists in control of 2 diaries and 1 weekly newspaper. In 1999, 2 radio stations faced legal orders for the seizure and sale at auction of their equipment. According to a statement by the National Nicaraguan Journalists Union, the radio stations La Purísima and Ya were being threatened by groups linked to then President Aleman in an attempt to silence any public criticism of the rise in corruption by high-level officials in his regime. It's not free to express the nation's political and ideological struggles in Nicaragua as well as North Korea. The Nicaraguan constitution provides that Nicaraguans have the right freely to express their ideas in public or in private, individually or collectively, verbally, in writing, or by any other means. However, there are a number of other laws and regulations that chip away at freedom of the press. In 1995, the Constitution of 1987 was reformed and several new articles were added related to the press. For example, Article 68 declared that the media had a social role to fulfill and that its practitioners should have access to all of the nation's citizens in order to fulfill their role. This article also exempts media companies from taxes on importing newsprint, machinery, equipment, and spare parts intended for use by the print and broadcast media. The explosion in television was propelled by rapid growth in the number of over-the-air channels and in the arrival and rapid diffusion of cable. In 1990, there were only 2 broadcast television stations, channels 2 and 6, run by the state monopoly network, and no cable stations. By 1995, there were 5 VHF and 2 HF stations. In 1999, there were 190 television sets for every 1,000 inhabitants. In 1995, there were 30 small cable companies in the country. Cable is prohibitively expensive for the majority of Nicaraguans, but affordable for only middle-class families. It was estimated that in 1999, only 4% of the population had cable. Since 1990, television has also become an important forum for the debate of national issues and politics. There have been many new live broadcast magazine format programs, including Channel 8's Porking Nicaragua Most Important, It Means Why Nicaragua Matters to Us, and a fonder, in-depth. Channel 2 has a popular 90-minute morning program, Buenos Dias, Good Morning, and a weekly news magazine program, Esta Semana con Carlos Fernando, This Week with Carlos Fernando, hosted by the former director of Barricada. As the history of the nation suggests, the communications media play a fundamental role in national national affairs. Journalists and journalism have been intricately tied to the nation's power brokers, who often owned the primary media instruments. Thus, media laws and the extent to which they are protected or enforced vary greatly from president to president. The country's dramatic political and economic shifts from the dictatorship of the Somoza dynasty to the Marxist Sandinists to the recent trend of neoliberalism have forced the media to rapidly change with the times as well. There have been frequent charges that the government has tried to control the press by selectively doing out governmental advertisement. These charges were especially prolific during Alemann's administration. Many newspapers that published articles criticizing his government saw a drastic reduction in government advertising, whereas those favorable to his administration received the bulk of it. The reason is that Alemann's government was the country's largest advertiser. La Prensa, the newspaper company, denounced the government tax agency for placing 4 times more advertising with the TCR than with the Prensa during a 6-month period, even though the Prensa's circulation was almost 10 times that of the TCR. In 1998, 2 large governmental agencies did suspend their ads in La Prensa. The government has also been charged with harassing papers by overzealous taxation. La Prensa declared government attempts to collect more than US $500,000 in tax penalties from the paper. The penalties resulted from 1999 audit that was conducted shortly after a Prensa published a report on governmental corruption. Television channels 2 and 8 also complained that they were being fiscally published by the Aleman government for their negative coverage of his administration. In 1996, a general law of telecommunications and postal services was passed requiring that information transmitted should not be contrary to the customs and moral values of the nation. It also established the conditions for the awarding of technical concessions and operating licenses. The majority of radio stations are operated on a small scale by volunteers. These radio stations are not regulated. Generally speaking, the content of radio programming is much broader than television. FM programming includes a variety of music formats, news, and listener call-in shows, and AM programming often features a mixture of news with music and opinion, traditional newscasts, music, radio dramas, humor shows, sports, and listener call-in shows. Independently produced radio news programs were a popular genre before 1979, although banned in the 1980s. As of the mid-1990s, listeners could choose from over 80 such programs. In most cases, there were one-person freelance undertakings where journalists rented airspace from the station. The greatest changes under Chamorro's presidency had to do with the dramatic transformation of the advertising industry from one that had previously been state-controlled and anti-capitalistic to a free media-based advertising model. Between 1990 and 94, 21 new advertising agencies were launched where only one had existed before. The lack of a mass consumer base, however, meant that these advertisers had to accept the reality of selling to a tiny elite. Advertising expenditures, as a result, dropped greatly between 1992 and 95. There are 105 radio stations. About popular AM stations, there are Radio Católica de Nicaragua, Radio Corporation. About popular FM stations, there are La Nueva Radioya and Radio Sandino. Most of radio stations located in Managua. There are 12 TV stations in Nicaragua. For example, national TV stations are 100% Noticias El Canal, Telenica, and Televicentro. Terrestrial TV stations are TN8, Canal 6, Canal 12, Nicaragua, and more. Cable TV stations is Boss TV. These TV stations play general or focus on music or news. Local newspapers are Bolsa de Noticias, El Nuevo Diario, La Prensa, Trinchera. La Prensa is the oldest and most established. Finally, people who live in Nicaragua may feel difficult to get various and free information through the media, which is controlled by the government. The economic is still developing, so people who can access information through the internet are minor. Hopefully, the media in Nicaragua will be developed sooner so that more people can have a better access to various information of their country.